up your mind.
Effective immediately, I am banning Mr. Sterling for life from any association with the Clippers organization or the NBA. Mr. Sterling may not attend any NBA games or practices. He may not be present at any Clippers facility, and he may not participate in any business or player personnel decisions involving the team. He will also be barred from attending NBA Board of Governors meetings or participating in any other league activity. I am also fining Mr. Sterling $2.5 million, the maximum amount allowed under the NBA Constitution. These funds will be donated to organizations dedicated to anti-discrimination and tolerance efforts that will be jointly selected by the NBA and its Players Association.
Oh, okay, good.
As for Mr. Sterling's ownership interest in the Clippers, I will urge the Board of Governors to exercise its authority to force a sale of the team, and will do everything in my power to ensure that that happens.
Okay.
This has been a painful moment for all members of the NBA family. I appreciate the support and understanding of our players during this process, and I am particularly grateful for the leadership shown by Coach Doc Rivers, Union President Chris Paul, and Mayor Kevin Johnson of Sacramento, who has been acting as the players' representative in this matter. We stand together in condemning Mr. Sterling's views. They simply have no place in the NBA.
No, they have no place in the NBA. And good for the NBA, for Commissioner Adam Silver speaking there just moments ago, actually it was about an hour ago, announcing the sanctions, I suppose, against Donald Sterling, the erstwhile owner of the Clippers. He is banned for life from the NBA. He is barred from all conduct or attending any NBA games. He's being fined $2.5 million, which Silver right there said is the maximum allowed under the NBA Constitution, but the Constitution is a top secret document, so we don't know what it says. But, you know, hey, it's private enterprise. Hey, welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Randi Rhodes Show. I'm Nicole Sandler of RadioOrNot.com, in for Randi this week. And, wow, that was fast. You know, good for them. I guess the Clippers have a game tonight. They wanted to get this sort of settled somehow before the game tonight because, apparently the players told the commissioner that they would boycott the games if swift action wasn't taken. So I'm pretty impressed. They stepped in, they got it done, banned for life, and furthermore, you heard him say they're going to do everything, or Adam. So I get confused with the Sterling and the silver. It's not sterling silver. I guess it's more like silver plate. You know, Donald Sterling is like, you know, pure sterling, or not really. Anyway, just, you know, it's a little weird, karma there or something. Anyway, so he said they're going to do everything to try to make Donald Sterling sell the team. What happens? I heard in the press conference, somebody asked, well, what about Magic Johnson? And Silver said, oh, we'd love to have Magic, as an owner. So we'll see what happens. But wow, see, that's how when people want to get something done, they get it done. When there's so much outrage, they get something done. It's amazing. Look, can we apply this to other things going on in our society today? What do you think?
We begin with some breaking news. Atlanta right now, a workplace shooting at a FedEx facility in the city of Kennesaw, just north of Atlanta. Our station WSB says at least 6 people have been rushed to the hospital, and there is no official word yet on their conditions. It's also unclear right now whether anyone has been taken into custody as of yet. A workplace shooting reported at a FedEx facility outside of Atlanta. We will have many more details as we get them.
Yeah, that was the breaking news this morning. After I took my kid to school, got home, turned on the computer, started the show prep, and that was one of the first things I saw. And, you know, I thought, gee, isn't that convenient? Because we have a show today planned around guns, because it is an epidemic in this country. Gun violence is an epidemic, right? And so when I planned to tackle this topic today, I thought, you know, well, we just had another shooting at Fort Hood, you know, at least the average in 2013, anyway, 30 people a day in the United States are lost to gun violence. But, you know, when you look at the swift action taken by the NBA, they had a problem and they nipped it in the bud. They said Donald Sterling's a racist. The players said we're going to threaten to boycott. They said, all right, we're going to fix it. And guess what? Boom, done. So let's look at the gun issue. December of 2012. And boy, do I remember this so clearly, because it happened on a Friday morning. And the following Monday, I was here for Randy. In fact, I was here for Randy, I think, for 2 weeks, because it was just the cusp of the Christmas vacation. And I remember coming in that Monday, and I was sick as a dog that week, and having to deal with the fact that 20 6- and 7-year-olds were murdered in their classroom. And all I could think, one of the things that I could think was that, gee, if ever, you know, something could happen to make our elected officials take action, to do something, to stop, you know, an epidemic, just a horrible problem that has taken over this country, well, maybe that's the silver lining. That's the legacy these 20 children and the 6 courageous teachers and administrators at the Sandy Hook Elementary School would give us, would leave us, that their, you know, deaths wouldn't be in vain, that they actually, you know, in dying, I hate to use the word martyr, but, you know, for the greater good, so that nobody else would ever be put in this position. And what did our elected officials do? That's right. That's the sound of nothing. Nothing. Yeah, there was some, you know, some lip service. The president actually did what he could with some executive orders, but nothing. Absolutely nothing. And since the Newtown massacre, there have been so many more. And it's really stunning. And I bring it up today for a number of reasons. One is that this past weekend was the NRA National Convention. Oh, yeah, it was their 2014 National Conference. They call it a conference. And, well, our buddy Cliff Schechter was there. He wrote about it for the Daily Beast in a story titled Preparing for War in Indianapolis, Inside the NRA Plot to Terrify America. Cliff is going to join us a little later on, because he actually spent Sunday walking around the Indianapolis Convention Center looking at 9 acres of guns and gear. Yeah, you read the article. That is, by the way, linked in the homework section at randyrhodes.com, and it will scare the bejesus out of you if you have any bejesus in you. Here's a little snippet of his piece. Military-style weaponry of every kind occupied almost every inch of the terrain to my left and right as I began the long trek down each aisle. Not your father's hunting rifle, for the most part, although there were a few of those here and there, but the kind of arms you use to start a war. 50 caliber rifles, which can take down small aircraft. Assault rifles, rebranded sporting rifles, in case your sport might be decimating a small village in under a minute. High-capacity magazines of the variety used in so many recent massacres at malls, schools, and universities. Some weapons were in glass display cases, while others were right out in front to touch at will. At first, the constant clicking of triggers and magazines being secured in place was a bit unsettling. Soon, it just blended into the background. What was hard not to notice was the look of glee on so many men's faces, white men for the most part, generally of less than athletic appearance, whose communal id had been unleashed. They looked like kids in a candy store, boys with toys, with a type of porn their political ideology can get behind. And so it goes. We'll talk with Cliff about that and about the massive disconnect. Look, we talked a little bit about the disconnect in our communal reaction to the racism that's inherent in our society today. And as I said yesterday, I think it's maybe people are more emboldened to, wear their bigotry proudly because, their idols on radio and TV do it with impunity. They do it just, because they can, because there are no consequences. Because Glenn Beck can call the president a racist and say it's a deep-seated hatred for white people. And Rush Limbaugh can, sing Barack the Magic Negro. And there are no consequences, right? So people feel emboldened to do it. And then, there are others who say, well, it's not only that, but this is a sign of, of the collective psyche out there. We may, the Supreme Court may tell us racism is over, right? We may be told, oh, things are so much better, so we really don't need, any protections under the Voting Rights Act, and we don't need affirmative action anymore. Yeah, thank you, Supreme Court, right? And we may be told, well, things are getting better. Look, we elected the first African-American president. But deep down, this is a country not only with an epidemic of gun violence, but really an epidemic of bitter, ugly racism. I believe that it will die off. I believe for the most part it's generational, and the Donald Sterlings of the world will die soon. And, Antonin Scalia will go with them because they're of that generation. But, Clive Bundy's kids are still around. So it's going to take a few generations for those attitudes to die out. But what I don't understand is why, because, I guess basketball, people love their sports. So we act quickly on that. And, I'm glad that the NBA took action. But why haven't we acted to squelch the rest of the racism in our society? And why haven't we done anything about gun violence? In a little bit, we're going to share with you what happened in Australia after their biggest massacre, 35 people killed in 1996. In fact, it happened yesterday, 18 years ago yesterday. And I spoke to one of the men who was responsible for pushing through sensible gun regulations in Australia, former Deputy Prime Minister Tim Fischer. I spoke with him last night from Australia, and we'll share that a little later. We can do it here. Won't be easy, but I think that's a fight worth getting behind. I think saving lives is worth sticking our necks out and being really loud about and threatening whatever we need to threaten so that our children are safe going to school. All right, I got a break. Nicole Sandler for Randi Rhodes. The phone number is 866-87-RANDI, 866-877-2634. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Randi will be back here on Monday, and she'll be back for the next couple of weeks. In the meantime, you got me, Nicole Sandler of RadioOrNot.com, in for Randi. And again, I'm really happy. It's nice to see something get done. People, outraged and action taken, and boom. Like in 24 hours, actually, it was more like 48 or 72 or something, but there was a weekend in there. They took action quickly. I just wonder why this? I mean, really over basketball and over a guy that it was really generally known that he was a despicable racist. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar made the rounds yesterday. I know he was both on Chris Matthews and Rachel Maddow's show. He wrote an op-ed at Time.com and basically saying, really, this is what it took, like a recording of a conversation with his girlfriend where he showed he's just like, a juvenile idiot. When we've known he's been a slumlord, yes.
That piece is linked in the homework today.
Okay, very cool. The Time piece is in the homework section at RandiRhodes.com. the offenses he's committed against minorities as a slumlord, as someone who, openly stated many times he didn't want, black or brown people in his apartments. He disparaged character and their hygiene. I mean, the things he said are disgusting. But this, I guess that's because, that's why local news broadcasts, the same goes, if it bleeds, it leads. You got the tape there, and it's shocking. And so great, people stood up. But again, should they have released the crime scene photos from Sandy Hook Elementary School? Might that have made a difference with gun regulations? Just a question for you. Mike in Madison, Wisconsin, listening on 92.1 The Mike. Hi.
Hi, Nicole. See, here's something that bothers me. I'm happy that this happened as well, but for different reasons. I mean, first of all, they didn't talk about anything about his problems with having a wife and a girlfriend and all this other stuff that I guess is socially acceptable.
Right. No, and what they said is didn't bring up any of his past offenses, which on their own would have been enough, I think, to ban him for life. Right?
We know why. He was given, then double ACP was in line because of the money that was being given. So money is a problem. But how about this correlation? I mean, what's the difference between teachers and the NBA players and, say, an idiot governor like Scott Walker and this loser owner who's anything but Sterling? I don't understand. The same people that would support the NBA players and would, in fact, even support their salaries by buying their jerseys, going to their games, watching their commercials, would belittle teachers if they went on strike and think that $35,000 a year is too much for something that is of value versus entertainment.
Right.
We're an entertainment country. It makes me want to throw up when I hear people cheering because now they get to watch a game when, in fact, the players are the only reason why you guys are watching the game. Had they not threatened to boycott it, if they went through with it, you wouldn't have a game.
That's right.
So why not support teachers and workers that go out every day try to make a living for their families, and it has nothing to do with entertainment. It has to do with damn survival.
You're so right, and this is why, this is why these two stories go together. Randi always says she does her show prep, she'll lay out all the articles and realize they're all connected. And in this case, are our priorities really that backwards, where we're so up in arms over what one billionaire said? Look, I can name a bunch of billionaires who are just really heinous individuals. They hoard money. They're just nasty, miserable creeps like this guy. But oh my God, we almost threatened your ability to watch basketball. But what about these teachers who are working for a pittance, right? Who now are being told, well, maybe a gun to school because, a shooter could come in, instead of our elected officials doing what they need to do and enacting background checks or sensible gun laws to protect all of us. It is just inconceivable.
It's totally backwards. You have parents who hate teachers whose job is to teach your kids so that they have a better life.
Right. They vilify them because, oh, my God, they get summers off. Are you kidding me?
The students get the summers off, not the teachers.
You're right. And the teachers, I saw a cartoon today. Thanks for the call, Mike. I saw a cartoon today with just an outside of a big apartment building like New York. And all the windows are dark except one that's lit up. And the caption said, can you tell which one the teacher lives in? Because they're up at night grading your kids' papers. Nicole, we'll be right back. Well, Randi will be back next Monday. I'm Nicole Sandler of RadioOrNot.com. And you might remember last summer, a young Australian student and baseball player was attending college in Oklahoma. And he was out for a jog. And three young men who said they were bored, stalked the guy, followed him, and shot him, killed him. And, just another instance of gun violence in America. Well, I had seen an interview with Piers Morgan, and appearing on that show was a man named Tim Fisher. Tim Fisher is a former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, and he was one of the people responsible for changing the gun laws in Australia after they had a horrific massacre there. What I realized, we recorded this last night because it's now very, very early in the morning over in Australia. So when I got home last night, I called and we taped it then. And after we hung up, I realized that that massacre, the Port Arthur massacre, happened 18 years ago yesterday, April 28th, 1996, and it changed everything there. So, well, let's wait no longer. Here we go. On the line with us now is Tim Fischer. Tim Fischer is a former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia. He's an ex-ambassador, now an author, businessman, and cattle rancher. His latest two books are by ABC Books Australia, Trains Unlimited, and Holy See, Unholy Me, 1,000 Days in Rome. And I guess the latter title comes from your years spent as the ambassador to the Holy See, huh?
Greetings to you, and yes, it does.
I guess I could ask you about the canonization of two former popes, but that's not why I called you today. Tim, I'm so thrilled that you agreed to join us today because I heard with great interest the interview you did with Piers Morgan following the murder last summer of a young Australian baseball player and college student who was living here in Oklahoma, going to school. He was killed by three teenagers who should never have been allowed anywhere near a gun, much less own one, and they said they were simply bored. These kind of things happen with horrible frequency here in the U.S., and I'm of the mind that something needs to be done. Now, you were Deputy Prime Minister in Australia. At the time, there was a horrible massacre. I guess our Newtown massacre that happened last year brought back a lot of memories for the people in Australia over a tragedy that occurred in 1996. Can you tell us what happened then?
Yes, in Tasmania, the island state just south of Melbourne, there's a tourist area known as Port Arthur, and it's an old fort and pleasant Sunday afternoon cafe, up to 100 visitors, when a young man picked up a gun and shot at will until eventually accosted, taking out some 35 people in our worst massacre, the Port Arthur massacre, and one which was the opportunity for Australia to take a decisive turn away from the NRA-type policy approach and make a difference under the then political leadership of Prime Minister John Winston Howard. Myself as Deputy Prime Minister and many others came on board, including state and federal governments, to make a real difference, make that a turning point.
Now, what were the gun laws like prior to that in Australia?
They were not in harmony. They were somewhat disjointed between the states. There was no overall link of computers with regard to gun weapon registration, let alone with regard to shooters' licenses. And so it became quite a chance for those who wanted. It was a laissez-faire approach which allowed the wrong people to have the wrong type of guns. In fact, we had semi-automatics in the suburbs to cut to the chase, and even worse. And therefore, it was crying out for action, and it certainly hit the top of the policy priority list in the aftermath of that dreadful massacre. But even so, there was a lot of pushback and resistance to executing sensible change.
So, but sensible change you made, and then some, because what is it like today in Australia? How often do you see gun murders in Australia these days?
This is why I'm even happy enough to come on board and visit with Mayor Bloomberg's campaign in the Midwest of the USA, in a Montana or in a Georgia, because it did work. It did make a difference. We have not had, touch wood, one gun massacre, death of 4 or more, in Australia since 1996.
Wow.
It's reached a stage now where you are 15 times or more likely to be shot dead in the USA per million people than here in Australia. Things have even if there are, sadly there probably will be at some stage, a form of gun massacre, it's off a more limited basis because the suburbs have been effectively drained semi-automatics, and the business of carrying guns into universities, into churches, allowing concealment of guns in some of the states of the USA simply does not exist here in Australia, where our program protects the rights of sporting shooters, protects the rights of cattle ranchers and others to have guns. I have guns, I own guns, but it requires simply a registration of those weapons and a qualification that you are an adequate shooter and that you can have a shooter's license. This is not an imposition. Even if we had a form of the Second Amendment, I would still regard the Australian gun laws as being compliant and successful and protecting gun owners and cattle ranchers to have guns, but stopping massacres, effectively stopping massacres completely.
Right. Again, if you're just joining us, we're speaking with Tim Fischer. He's the former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia and was in office when Australia suffered its worst massacre back in 1996 and helped to usher through some common sense gun regulations, and the outcome is tangible. As Mr. Fischer just told us, not a single mass killing, over 4 people killed since 1996, since those laws were put in place. Now, obviously, you follow what's going on over here in the States, and it's truly sickening. I mean, it's the only way I can describe it. We have an NRA that, while it used to represent, I think, the rights of gun owners, responsible gun owners, now it's more of a lobbying arm for the arms industry, for the gun industry, for gun makers. The propaganda is out of hand. They just had their big NRA convention last weekend, and the bloodlust is almost palpable. And they talk about, the right to bear arms as equated with freedom, without bothering to, note that actually the right to life is I think, more freedom than the right to own a gun. I think the world looked on in horror back in December of 2012 when 20 little first graders were gunned down, were murdered in their classroom, and the 6 adults who tried to help them. And I thought if anything would make the legislators in this country do something, that would be it. But if that can't motivate them to take action and enact some background checks, some common sense laws, can you imagine anything that would? I mean, what advice can you give us to shake some sense into these people?
It's certainly no excuse to say, look, it's just too hard. We have the Second Amendment, often misinterpreted. We have the safety checks of the Senate and split between the administration and the White House and the U.S. Congress. Therefore, we'll just continue to allow states to pass even more extreme gun laws and just close our eyes to the outcome of that and further shelter more and more into cocoons of safety and ghettoize American society. That's a pathway you can avoid. That's a pathway you need to avoid, in my view. I respect the fundamentals of the U.S. Constitution and the right for the U.S. to choose its path, but it should do so with open eyes. And here in Australia, it was a major political battlefield. I was attacked the length and breadth of the country. I was accused as a Vietnam veteran of letting down the side by supporting sensible gun laws, and I was hung in effigy at a place in Queensland whilst attending a meeting inside a hall, where eventually a 12-year-old high school student stood up and completely nailed the case as to why sensible gun laws make a lot of sense, allowing people of need and people of desire to have guns, but essentially draining the suburbs of their semi-automatics and concealed guns. You are getting to a stage in the USA where Australians should think very carefully about travelling to the USA, travelling to a Georgia or a Montana with their extreme gun laws, and I have publicly advised people here just to weigh the risk factor. Yes, there's always risk in travel, period, to any country in the world, period. But the situation with guns on the streets in the USA has reached a tipping point.
And in fact, your warning was the other thing that made me want to reach out to you and track you down, and I'm glad I did, because I heard you in this interview, and here's the quote. You said, "It is another example of murder mayhem on Main Street. People thinking of going to the USA for business or tourist trips should think carefully about it, given the statistical fact that you were 15 times more likely to be shot dead in the USA than in Australia per capita." And here's my thought, Tim. If the massacre of 26 and 7-year-olds in their classroom can't motivate our elected officials or politicians here in the U.S. to take action, I guess the only thing that motivates these people is money. And maybe we need to hit them in the pocketbook. And if we start costing this country, big cities, small cities, tourist attractions, if we start costing tourist dollars, then maybe they'll sit up and take notice. I was thrilled that you said, you warned people they should think twice before coming here. But I think we need to take it a step further. And I know you're no longer in Parliament, you're no longer Deputy Prime Minister, but how can we go about getting countries like Australia, perhaps, England and other countries that have had similar issues? They've been hit by a tragic gun violence a massacre incident that made them take action, and things have gotten better. How do we make those countries to take an official stand and really issue a travel advisory warning their citizens against coming here?
The case is building, and it's going to happen sooner rather than later. And when you have the death on a pleasant afternoon of young Mr. Lane, an Australian in the USA, that just nails the case further. So I think there is going to be a dawning of realisation, notwithstanding the worst and best efforts of the NRA. And yes, I saw some of the footage from their recent annual meeting. I think people who have brains, who have served in the United Nations as ambassador for the USA, no mean position in the hierarchy of the world, are going to have to look in the mirror and use their brains or face the alternative of a descent into absolute lawlessness. And Mayor Bloomberg deserves credit, and others, for stepping up to bring pressure to bear to turn the corner, use this tipping point to make a difference before it's too late and before even more people are gunned down unnecessarily. It is sapping the will on the performance and the productivity and the peace of the USA. The NRA has much to answer for.
Oh, absolutely. You nailed it. And again, I can't help but wonder if the Newtown massacre didn't get our politicians to do something, to do anything. Nothing was done in the wake of that. 2 mass shootings at Fort Hood, a massacre in a movie theater. It's just the incidents that goes on and on. It is an epidemic. And maybe the only way to get our elected officials to take action is to hit them in the pocketbook, to cause financial hardship.
And that is a way forward. But, Nicole, the Washington Post table, looking at arm's length, country by country, just shows how bad it is in the USA versus most other OECD countries. Even Italy is better. It's incredible that where I served as an ambassador, where there's talk of the ongoing existence of the mafia and the Camorra, and yet you are safer Italy than you are in the United States of America, the so-called land of the free.
It is. It is sickening. That chart, by the way, will have in an article that I wrote in the homework section at randyrhodes.com. It's also on my blog at radioornot.com. Tim Fisher, I can't thank you enough. And I'm sure the people of Australia now, almost 2 decades later, probably many of the same who, I can't believe, hung you in effigy. How frightening is that? I'm guessing they've come around and realized that you can have common sense laws, regulations, background checks, and still enjoy the freedom of a firearm when necessary, or even for sport, but remain safer in society because of it. Yes?
Nicole, common sense hopefully will eventually prevail because here in Australia, we reached the tipping point. We changed our laws. We harmonised our laws. We protected the rights of people to own guns, but introduced some safety and harmonisation that made a huge difference. No gun massacres since 1996. I urge the USA to look closely at the Mayor Bloomberg campaign, related campaigns, and make your streets safe again before it is too late. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Tim Fisher, former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, making a lot of sense. Your turn to weigh in next. Nicole for Randy. We'll be right back. Nicole Sandler in for Randi Rhodes. So what do you think? Is that a good idea? Look, if the murderers of 20 children in their classroom won't get our elected officials to act, the only thing that works on these people is money. If we start threatening, income, tourist dollars, maybe then they'll take action. To the phones, Stan in Fort Lauderdale, listening on WBZT. Hi there, you're on the Randi Rhodes Show with Nicole.
Hey, good afternoon, Nicole. I'm glad you're on the radio. It's always a pleasure to listen to you.
Thank you.
My take is that I think, first of all, the NRA, people need to understand the NRA is a lobby shop.
Yep.
If people want to bear guns and they want to have their arms, I'm a gun owner, I don't see the NRA as beneficial. If you want your right to own a firearm, these people should be protecting your right to have equal pay, to have great employment, to have health benefits, a safe work environment. What's the point of having guns if you're too poor to maintain them?
Well, and there's more to it, too. It's not, look, there's so many other pressing issues. Unfortunately, nobody's trying to take away their guns. I wish they were, or at least I wish they were trying to put in legislation demanding background checks and common sense regulations like they now have in Australia. They still have guns.
I mean, like this Sandy Hook was horrendous. I've fired high-powered rifles, and for somebody to shoot a child with a high-powered rifle, there isn't even words to describe.
Right. Oh, it's sickening. It is sickening. Stan, thank you for the call. More of your calls on the other side. Nicole for Randy. Don't go away.